Hey, y'all. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Royce, the Executive Director of Annie's List. I'm excited to be here virtually with all of you and really looking forward to talking with our special guest, Jaime Harrison. But first, and for those who may be new, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Annie's List and our work. Since our founding, Annie's List has elected more than 160 progressive women all across Texas, trained thousands more, and invested over $20 million to build women's political power. Throughout a global pandemic, Annie's List has continued to grow and to adapt. Last cycle, we re-elected 24 legislative incumbents, trained over 450 future candidates and campaign staff, and more than 1,800 people tuned in to our virtual conversation series and events, none of which was possible without your dedication and belief in Annie's List. That's why I'm so grateful to all of you joining us today, and especially to our host committee, whose support will allow us to continue to build on our successes in 2021 and beyond. Y'all, we all know how vital this work is, and we can clearly see how our communities are made better when women leaders are at the table. And with every election, we're getting closer to a blue Texas and to reaching gender parity in our state legislature and in local offices across the state. And that's why I'm excited to be joined by DNC Chair Jaime Harrison today. He knows a thing or two about our fight to turn Texas blue. Jaime Harrison currently serves as the chair of the Democratic National Committee. As the son of a teenage single mom, Jaime was raised by his grandparents in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He knows what it's like for a family to have to choose between paying the electric bill and putting food on the table, and what it feels like to go to sleep in a home with no heat because the power was shut off. Jaime credits having a good public school education, the love of his family, and the support of his community for his ability to earn a scholarship to Yale and to attend Georgetown Law. After that, he worked as a teacher at his old high school and used his passion for education to help empower low income and disadvantaged kids to find their paths to attend college. Jaime served as the first ever African American chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party from 2013 to 2017, until he was appointed by then DNC Chair Tom Perez as an associate chair of the DNC. And then Jaime ran for the United States Senate in South Carolina during the 2020 election cycle and built a national grassroots movement. Y'all, by the end of his campaign, he had broken the fundraising record for the most money ever raised by a US Senate candidate. In 2021, Jaime was nominated by President Joe Biden to succeed Tom Perez as DNC chair. Chair Harrison, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're doing well. Let's jump in. And in the first instance, can you tell us what brought you to this work?
Yeah, listen, uh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. When I think about when I started becoming interested in politics, it happened when I was just a kid. Back in 1988, I think I was watching the Democratic convention, and
Mm,
Jesse Jackson was addressing the convention. And here's this man who grew up in South Carolina, raised by his grandparents, similar to the way that I
mm,
was being raised by my grandparents. And he was talking about how young people can get involved and the power of hope.
mm,
And that just sparked an interest in me in politics and about how you can fundamentally change the lives of people through public policy, through government. Went on and interned in uh, Senator Hollings' office, my senator from South Carolina, and then Congressman Jim Clyburn's office, and then started working on Capitol Hill. Uh, then decided to run for chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, ran for DNC chair, didn't win. Then I ran for U.S. Senate, didn't win, and now I'm the chair of the DNC. So, I've had an interesting career in politics. When I was on the Hill as a staffer, I was the first African American executive director, and I ran the whip operation. And during all of those experiences, I saw the power of how you can transform the lives of people. And I know how my life has been transformed because of the opportunities that others were able to present to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love this work. I get great joy from it, particularly because of the joy that you can provide to the lives of people.
Well, I love that story, and not just because I was also a very young child in 1988, and one of my favorite T-shirts to wear was a Jesse Jackson T-shirt. Until my mother would be like, "Can we just get that in the wash for, for a second?" I was very devoted even then. But let's get right to Texas. Over the past few months and through the pandemic, we have experienced just some of the worst leadership in the country from Texas Republicans, from governor on down, and from our Republican federal representatives, from refusing to expand Medicaid and exploiting the pandemic to ban abortion, to some actively inciting the January 6th insurrection. And we know that you've come out really strongly against the likes of John Cornyn and Ted Cruz. Real talk, how do we get rid of these guys?
Yeah, it's a long time coming. Abbott, Cornyn, Cruz, they're just waste of space because they do not represent the people in Texas. They represent their own special interests. They only care about their own political power, and frankly, they don't give a damn about the lives of the people in their states. If Ted Cruz really cared about the people in Texas, he wouldn't have been on that plane to Mexico to enjoy reprieve um, uh, from the winter storm that the state had been hit by. Fine, send your family away if that's you got the means to do that. If you want to do that, that's your prerogative. But you are the United States Senator for the state of Texas. That means you're like the captain of the ship, and you go down with the ship, right? You need to be the last person standing, making sure that all of the other people are get off first
Yeah.
because that's your responsibility as a leader. And then don't blame it on your daughters. That is you, sir.
Yeah.
You are the dad. You are the father. It is on you. You put the blame squarely on you to do what you know is in the best interest of the people. But that's what Ted Cruz is. He's somebody who will whine about this and whine about that and want to do a press conference, but won't do any of the work that needs to be done in order to improve the lives of the people. And then, Cornyn is a rubber stamp, and Abbott, who knows what he is, right? Your lieutenant governor was when the this time last year was basically telling your grandmas and your grandpas they just need to be sacrificed in order to save the economy,
Yeah.
right? It is time that Texas gets real leadership that is worthy of the people of Texas. I mean, right now, Joe Biden sent in the American Rescue Plan $5 billion to Texas. That if Texas decided to expand Medicaid right now for the next 2 years, the state of Texas would get $5 billion for Medicaid expansion.
Mm-hmm.
1.5 million Texans would get health care,
Mm-hmm.
and they refuse to do so. Does that are they doing refusing because they are representing the people of Texas? No, they represent their own political interests. And it's time for the people of Texas to get rid of dead weight. And we at the DNC are here to help in that process.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, to your question as to, I don't know what Abbott is even doing. I also don't know what he's doing for the people of Texas, but what he seems to be doing for himself is to position himself for a potential presidential run, which is something that alarms anybody who has seen his leadership here at the state level. But recently, um, the US Census Bureau announced that Texas will be receiving two new congressional seats. Uh, and we know this is because of our fast growing populations of people of color throughout the state. I know that you know this as well as anyone, but for the people in the back, our Hispanic population will soon be our largest demographic group in the state. Our Asian population is our fastest growing community, and Texas has more Black people than any other state. And with these two new seats, we'll have 40 electoral votes, second only to California. How does this news impact the DNC's strategy for Texas this cycle and going forward?
Yeah. Well, just going back to the census, the same way that the Republicans are trying to suppress the vote in minority communities now, they actually did suppress those voices in the census
Mhm.
over the past year or so. And it's not clear how big of an undercount there will be after Trump and the Republicans spent so much time and energy and effort to scare minority communities from filling out the census. But my worry is that the communities just won't get the resources that they actually need. Now, in terms of the growth of states, that gain seats, um, the reason why they have done that is because of what you mentioned, that there's been a large growth of minority voters. And that doesn't necessarily benefit Republicans who've been so out of touch with these communities for years now. So Democrats, I believe, will continue to be competitive in these communities. As I've told folks, what you are seeing is what I call the reverse migration. The African Americans who great grandfathers and great grandmothers moved to the industrial Midwest and the Northeast in the 19 teens and 20s, and now those folks are coming back home. They're coming back home to Texas and to Georgia and to North Carolina and Florida, and they are impacting the politics in those areas. So that means then we need to double down in our efforts in terms of our outreach efforts to make sure that those folks are registered, that they are educated about the issues that are important in those communities, that they're mobilized, and then that we get them to the polls, and that when they get to the polls, we actually protect them once they are there, protecting their rights to vote. And so it's just really, really important for us to do that. It's important for us to continue to deliver for these people, to deliver things that improve their lives, and our message has to get to those people as well.
Mhm. Well, we absolutely agree at Annie's List. And we know that in part, it's about finding the right candidates. And of course, we believe that the strongest candidates are women, plain and simple. If women's voices aren't at the table, everyone loses. And we're seeing that right now in Texas, in everything from egregious legislation being pushed in the ledge to um, a really horrific allegation of sexual abuse surrounding our state capitol complex. And the fact that there aren't enough women in the room is a foundational part of why these types of things can happen. Can you talk to us about the DNC's investment in women candidates and, in particular, women of color?
Yeah. Well, we actually have a program in our African American outreach, a program specifically targeted to Black women. It's called Seat at the Table, because that's what's really, really important. One of the things I remember from my time as a congressional staffer, uh, because it tended to be that there weren't very many women and very little people of color at the leadership tables, making decisions that impact all of us. And it's important to have women represented and in leadership in these crucial organizations. I saw that that was a problem when I was chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, and we did something about it. We created a program called the James E. Clyburn Political Fellowship, where we set out to go out to address some of the deficiencies that we had in terms of candidates and leaders in our party. This fellowship is now been in existence for 5 years, and we have recruited a tremendous number of women to serve as political operatives, to run for office themselves, to be county party leaders. And it's transformed the face of our party. We are looking at replicating that program on a national level and actually working with our state parties to replicate the Clyburn Fellowship so that they can make it their own, to address some of the deficiencies that we see in terms of women and specifically women of color in some of the leadership positions in our party. And so we will also continue to partner with organizations like Emerge, and other Higher Heights and other organizations that are out there that are looking at recruiting women. Emily's List, recruiting women to run for office, to train them, and to make sure that they are equipped with the resources necessary to win.
And Annie's List.
And Annie's List, exactly.
Well, and don't forget about us in Texas because again, we have more Black people than any other state, which means we have more Black women than any other state, which means we have more women who could really use the support of a program like a seat at the table than any other state. We're many steps away from parity here, and we need it. Now, let me sort of take it back to a strategic question. You've said yourself that you believe Texas is the next Georgia. In 2020, Texas outperformed most all other states. We've got numbers that look like what Georgia looked like a cycle ago. And with prolonged investment, we know that Texas will do something incredibly transformative for the politics of really the entire country. And, we and our allies here on the ground are working hard to make it the case. But can you break down the sort of Texas Georgia comparison a little bit more for us and talk about specifically how the DNC will help us tackle the 2022 cycle and the long term goals we have to really change um, who's holding power in the
Yeah.
state?
For far too long, many of our southern states have been dismissed as too red or too rural, too this and too that for the Democrats to even compete in those states. But you and I both know that that's nowhere near the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And as chair, what I am committed to is a strategy of organizing everywhere, a strategy that takes no voter and no community for granted. Because we are simply done looking at the map and ignoring the red while we just focus on a few purple areas. We have to be able to compete everywhere for every vote. Texas is, top of my agenda for the 2022 election cycle because I believe it is right for the transformation. You've talked about the demographics of the state. We just need to make sure that we have the organizing that needs to take place on the ground to get these communities organized, educated, mobilized, and then to the polls and protect them once they get there. And so we are working with the chair of the Texas Democratic Party, Chairman Hinojosa, and a number of other folks, DNC members, to figure out ways that the DNC can be much more helpful to figure out the resources that we can provide to the state parties so that they can be helpful to their local entities. And that's really important. I think that is the seed that has to be planted in order for Texas to blossom, to grow and blossom like we all know that she can.
You're just speaking my language right now, and I love it. I really do um, know and believe that once we reach our goals in Texas, it's going to be transformative for the whole
Yes.
country. And so I really appreciate your um, understanding what's at stake and what we can do here, and um, letting us know that we're top of mind and top of the agenda for you. That's really exciting for all of us working here on the ground. Uh, you know, we have some skeptics. And so I'd love it if you could speak a little bit to the question of, what do you say to those who feel discouraged about Texas politics or skeptical about the possibility of change, or who disagrees that we can turn it blue? Because 2022 for us is um, just a major year. All our statewide offices are up for grabs. All of our legislative offices are up for grabs. And at Annie's List, we are really leaning into the fight. We know we have to keep pushing forward. We can't afford to give any ground right now. What do you say to folks to sort of um, get them bought into the cause?
Yeah. Well, midterms are historically tough for the party that holds the White House, and there's just no question about that. And many folks have told me, Jamie, history is against the Democrats, but we are just coming off of two races in Georgia where we faced tough odds and we won. And folks told us, well, historically, Democrats can't win runoff elections. Well, not only did we win one, we won two. And we did that because we out organized and outworked our opponents. And we're going to build on those lessons going into 2022. And I believe that with President Biden in charge, our party actually has an opportunity to make our own history. We made history when we defeated an incumbent president for the first time in nearly 30 years. And President Biden's putting an agenda together that is unifying the American people, but that is also delivering for the American people. And I think that's a powerful thing to have, that win to have at your back. And so we are just committed to empowering our Democrats so that we can compete everywhere, and making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to be successful. Because I believe in the end of the day, it's just let's have the boots on the ground. Let's do the outreach that needs to happen. Let's make sure we recruit the best and the brightest to run, and let's put our message out there. And I think if we can do that, and all the while connecting with the voters, we will be well positioned to make our own history in 2022.
Mhm. What do you think that most effective, most sort of poignant message is for folks? Here in Texas, we've got a robust conversation happening about kind of what our messaging was in 2020 and should be going forward. And I'm interested in how you think about it.
The one thing I tell our local candidates, don't focus on what the national message is. Focus on the message in the district that you are running in. And you build your message based off of your conversations with the people that you want to represent. You want your message to be the salient for those folks who you want to represent. Don't go talking about this and that if the folks that you want to represent don't care about this or that, or that's not high on their priority list. And so the communication needs to not be, are you communicating with the folks in DC to give you talking points for what you need to say in Southwest Texas? No, but the way that it should happen is you communicate with the people in Southwest Texas and you see if there's anything that supplements your message from talking with them that the folks in DC or other places can provide to you. So again, keep it focused on local. That old adage from Tip O'Neill, all politics are local. So true. Keep it local, keep it focused on that, address the issues that people care about. Let them know that you see them, that you hear them, and most importantly, that you value them. That's the important. That needs to be the underpinning of your message throughout your district. You do that, then you're well on your way.
That's so smart, and especially for Texas, I think, where we even within the state are so large and have so many different communities and so many different um, concerns around the state that you can't even sort of um, there's no statewide message really. Even when you're getting down into communities, you find that Houston cares about different things from Plano, cares about different things from folks in the valley, cares about different things from folks in El Paso, and you really have to be um, listening with specificity to what voters care about in order to connect with them. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. I'm interested to also, you mentioned the need for building the infrastructure that can really sustain the work that we're trying to do. And of course, one of the things we've seen over the past year very intensely is uh, a culture of protest springing up across the country, in response to police violence, in response to a number of inequities. How do you think about bridging that sort of direct action with electoral outcomes?
Well, one of the things I think is important is, as you have protests, you need to at the same time do registration. It's important to have your voice heard through protests, but it's also important, equally important, if not more important, to have your voice heard at the ballot box, because that is how you take you're exercising your right of speech and freedom to turn that into action. you know, I, I you know, I grew up in the Christian faith, and one of the teachings that we learned is faith without works is dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not good enough to just have faith that things will get better. It's not good enough to just talk about the fact that things need to get better. We all have to take action to make things better. And that action that we have in order to transform our lives, that action takes place with that four-letter word, which is vote. Uh, and and it's that four-letter word that also gives us the motivation to change things. I mean, it provides hope,
Mm-hmm.
which is so critical.
Another four-letter word.
Another four-letter word, exactly. I often tell people that the thing that sort of inspires me, keeps me going. One of the things I love about South Carolina is our motto. Our motto is "While I breathe, I hope."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I told folks during my campaign for the Senate that we were changing that. Not while I breathe, I hope, but while I breathe, I vote, because that is how we bring hope to communities. And it's important for us to recognize that our power to vote, to transform our communities, to transform our states, and to put in the power of people who represent us and our hopes and our aspirations and our dreams. Uh, all of that can be done just through our going to exercise our rights. And that's why it's so important that we protect that
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely powerful. And if I'm recalling my seventh grade Texas history correctly, our motto is friendship, which says less, but which I also think too many of us have strayed away from these days.
right. Yeah.
It's about taking care of each other in community. But I like your call to action with "As I breathe, I vote." That's I like that a lot. Um, we're coming close to the end of our time with each other. One of the questions I love to end these conversations with is sort of a conversation about how you maintain your motivation and your readiness for this fight.
Hmm.
Uh, it's tough.
Oh, it
It's tough
is.
these
It's
days,
draining.
and it's easy, I think, to get discouraged, and especially on the state level in some of these places, and especially here in Texas. So how do you keep yourself going, and what do you have to say to folks who are with us about how to keep up with the fight?
Yeah. Well, my motivation are my kids, my two boys. Um, Whenever I get tired, whenever I get fatigued, whenever I feel beaten down by the world and what's going on, I think about the reason why I'm doing that is doing this work is because of them.
Mhm. How
Uh,
old are they?
6 and 2.
Oh, for
Uh,
heaven's sake.
yeah, so they are my sun and my moon and my stars. I mean, my world revolves around them. And so, when I think about the issue of voting rights, I think about I don't want my sons to grow up in a world like my grandfather grew up in, where
Hmm.
he didn't get the opportunity to exercise his right to vote because of the color of his skin. I am, I tell you what, I will, every breath in my body, every drop of blood that flows through my veins will be focused and dedicated to make sure that none of the lineages of Jim Crow that my grandfather had to grow up in, my grandmother had to grow up in, are things that my sons and the sons and daughters growing up in South Carolina across the country have to inherit.
Yeah.
That's part of my fight. That's part of my motivation is to make sure that that does not happen. And you know, in the end of the day, it's about them, and it's about, you know, moving forward. It's about, you know, the having hope for the future, and that means we have to do our part to fight for it, to build a future that they deserve.
They're they're so young, they're babies.
Yeah.
I wonder, have you had any version of the talk with them?
Mm. You know, my 6-year-old is probably much more aware than most 60-year-olds are.
Hmm.
And so, you know, 2-year-old is, oh, you know, he doesn't care. It's like, can I open and close the dishwasher 20 times? Or, but my 6-year-old is has a huge, um, I think, over an outsized heart for empathy, and he's very very emotional about a lot of things, and what's and right versus wrong. And so, you know, we have, when the protests started this summer, we had conversations, and we've had conversations about things that were happened in the past. You know, in in school and in home, he learns about, you know, civil rights leaders like Dr. King and what they had to do. And so for him, and still for me, you know, it's hard to get your arms around it sometimes, that we as a people could mistreat or treat others in a different way, in such a awful way, simply because of something that we can't control, which is the color of our skin.
Hmm.
And so, you know, we have conversations, and we give him as much as we think he can handle,
Hmm.
and not too much to burden him into worrying about what is going on in the world. One thing I don't believe is, you know, listen, as you get older, you get a lifetime of worrying about various issues. I'm a firm believer that as a kid that you should enjoy that time as a kid because you won't get it back. And so, uh, let I'll carry the weight for him at the moment, but you know, we still at the same time want to make sure that he's cognizant that the world is not perfect. The world is not always good. There are people in the world that are not always good, and because we don't want him to be naive to that, but at the same time, we don't want to start setting him off with all carrying the worries that we carry.
Yeah, it's such a balance to strike. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us. I know you have a hard stop and a busy day, so I really just, on behalf of Annie's List and also on behalf of myself, thank you for your time and thank you for appreciating Texas. And we're so excited to be in this fight with you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do, and all that Annie's List does as well. And we're looking forward to working with you all.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.